Daenerys Targaryen opened her eyes. The world rushed back in a riot of sensation, the frigid tug of the wind across her cheeks, the rasp of air through her lungs, a dull ache in every muscle of her body. Even the beating of her own heart startled her. She remembered, in fragments, the moment before her life had ebbed. She recalled Drogon's anguished roar and the fire in her veins fading to darkness. Now she was in a place of flickering torchlight and echoing stone. The cold seeped through the floor, and the walls glowed with sullen embers in iron braziers. Someone stood above her, a robed silhouette, and another kneeling figure with smoke-wreathed hands pressed to her chest. She could not find the words to ask who they were or how she was breathing again. Her tongue felt thick and unwieldy, her mind reeled under the onslaught of memories. Where was Jon? Where was Tyrion? Where was her army? Where was Drogon? Bit by bit, her scattered thoughts gave shape to her circumstances. "Breathe, my queen," a soft, insistent voice intoned. Daenerys wanted to speak, but her lips refused. Someone was bending close, checking her pulse, or perhaps measuring the flicker in her eyes. All she could do was obey that command. She breathed, a ragged gasp trembling with unspent sorrow. The flames around them flickered as though caught in an unseen breeze. A shadow moved behind the kneeling figure. Daenerys tried to focus on it. A slender woman garbed in red cloth that glimmered in the half-light, eyes shining with an almost inhuman brightness. Melisandre, the Red Woman. Daenerys had seen that face in passing once, during those final days, though the memory was hazy. Perhaps it was a trick of her resurrected mind, or some leftover echo of the realm beyond life. But she believed distantly that this figure was Melisandre of Asthae, the priestess who served the Lord of Light. When Daenerys tried to rise, her body jerked with pain. A stifled cry escaped her lips. Her senses whispered that she should be dead. The last thing she remembered clearly was the betrayal in Jon's eyes, the taste of iron in her mouth, and the sudden hush as the blade slid between her ribs. Yet here she was. Melisandre's voice coiled through the hush. "You have come back to us." The woman's accent made the words sound like a prophecy. "The Lord of Light has willed it. Fire is not finished with you, Daenerys Stormborn." The priestess spoke with reverence, and Daenerys recognized something in Melisandre's manner, something she herself once possessed. Raw certainty. And then the memories threatened to overwhelm her again, the horrors she had unleashed on King's Landing, the taste of vengeance in her mouth, the knowledge of how she had fallen. But now she had awakened in a place that smelled of ashes and stale air, with Melisandre murmuring incantations that lapped at Daenerys' ears like waves of warmth. She summoned every scrap of willpower to speak. Her voice came in a hoarse whisper, scarcely more than a hush. "I died." Melisandre's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Death is but a doorway if the flame wills it. You have walked beyond the veil. But there is still a destiny you have not fulfilled." Daenerys' eyelids fluttered. She wondered if she was truly breathing. The smell of incense and old smoke clung to the back of her throat. Her mind latched onto the thought of Jon once more, but the name refused to come from her lips. Instead, she steadied her breath, willing her body back to life. "Where am I?" "In the catacombs beneath Dragonstone," Melisandre said, gesturing subtly to the ancient walls. "We had little choice but to bring you here. There are still those who do not wish to see the Mother of Dragons rise again. But the Lord of Light has preserved you for a purpose." Daenerys' heart pounded at the mention of Dragonstone. Memories flickered, the crash of the sea, the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, the place she had once called home. In her mind's eye, she saw the carved dragons in the throne room, the imposing silhouette of the castle. 1,000 questions arose in her thoughts. She did not know which one to ask first. The kneeling figure, an acolyte in red robes, moved aside. Daenerys forced herself up, leaning on her elbows. Pain tore through her torso. A fresh bandage wrapped around her midsection, thick with the pungent smell of healing herbs. She swallowed, finding her mouth dry as desert dust. How Daenerys began, and the question splintered on her lips. "How long has it been?" "Many moons," Melisandre replied gently. "Not years, if that is your concern. But enough time for the realm to settle itself into uneasy peace, to forget the nightmares of war, to whisper its legends of the last Dragon Queen." Daenerys closed her eyes, letting the trembling wash over her. The realm had moved on while she lay in the blackness of death. Her people, her armies. She wondered who had survived and who had perished. Had the Dothraki and Unsullied left Westeros entirely? Had Drogon wandered the skies alone? She felt an almost crushing sense of loss. Her eyes snapped open again. Drogon? She searched Melisandre's expression. "Where is he?" Melisandre hesitated, and that fleeting uncertainty made Daenerys' heart thump harder. "He roams the skies. He lingered for many days after your passing. He carried you away from the city, though none witnessed precisely where he laid you to rest. The Lord of Light granted me a vision, guiding me to your resting place deep in a place of ice and snow. There, in secret, we performed the rites to restore you. Ice and snow, Daenerys thought. She recalled how the climate had begun to shift again, how the last hints of winter still lingered. A swirl of confusion drifted through her. He left me there? Grief does strange things even to dragons. But in time he drifted, searching for you. We have seen him more than once streak across the sky near Dragonstone. He circles, letting loose roars that shake the windows of the castle. He knows you are near, but he does not yet understand. He is wary, angry. He will come to you in time when he senses your heartbeat again. Daenerys pressed a hand to her bandaged torso, unsure if she was comforted or terrified by the notion. She remembered Drogon's anguish, how his rage had burned the Iron Throne to slag after her death. Rage that might still smolder within him. The acolyte brought water in a clay cup. Daenerys sipped it, wincing at how her throat burned with dryness. Though the water was tepid, it offered faint relief. She looked at Melisandre, who hovered over her like a watchful spirit. Why? Daenerys rasped at last. Why bring me back? A warmth glinted in Melisandre's dark eyes. The world of men is not finished with you. Their fragile peace is built on shifting sand. You, Daenerys Storborn, are the flame to purge the old rot that remains. The Lord of Light has shown me your path. There is a war coming that few can imagine. The true long night was only delayed, not averted. Shadows gather once more beyond the horizon, and you must be their reckoning. Without you, the realm will collapse into chaos. With you, it can be redeemed or burned clean. Daenerys tried to reconcile the swirl of emotions that rose at those words. She had wanted to break the wheel of tyranny to forge a better world. Yet in her final days, something in her had frayed. Perhaps it was grief or the madness rumored to run through Targaryen blood. Had she truly brought liberation, or had she unleashed terror upon King's Landing? The memory churned. She was not sure if she could trust herself or if she might descend again into that all-consuming fire of vengeance and retribution. But she also remembered her dream. She had wanted to build something new. A place where the innocent would not fear those who wielded power. If the realm was truly in danger again, did she have a right to stand aside? Teach me, she breathed, glancing at the Red Priestess. Show me how I can do better. Melisandre stepped closer, resting a hand atop Daenerys's. Your old ways are not so easily discarded. But the Lord of Light is generous with second chances. We will show you the path. In flame we are reborn, and in flame we shall triumph. But to do so, we must claim your power. The dragons heed your voice. The people will tremble at your name. The might you wield is not something to fear, it is something to master. Daenerys closed her eyes against the swirl of torchlight on the cold stone walls. She felt the weight of destiny pressing on her shoulders again, that old, familiar burden. Yet now she had walked through death. She had seen what it cost to rule by fear and flame alone. She wanted to be worthy of whatever second chance she had been given. A faint tremor coursed through her body. I need to rest. Melisandre nodded and gestured to the acolyte. You will rest here tonight. Tomorrow, if your strength permits, we begin. Daenerys let them help her settle upon a low pallet of blankets, ignoring the protests of pain from her stiff limbs. She sank back into fitful sleep, haunted by the ghosts of her past. Her dreams were filled with swirling ash, with a vast city in flames, with the sight of her dragons overhead. She saw images of herself crowned in dragonfire, but also weeping over the wreckage of war. And in the darkest corner of her dream, she saw a figure with dark curls and sorrowful eyes, the memory of his betrayal cutting her anew. Yet when she jolted awake at some unknown hour, sweat-soaked and trembling, a quiet determination filled her chest. She was alive. She had been brought back for a reason. She would not squander it. The next day brought a wash of pale light through narrow fissures in the stone. The catacombs were dreary. Melisandre stood near a wide brazier, feeding it with black lumps of coal that burst into bright flame at her touch. The acolyte helped Daenerys sit, offering a steaming mixture of herbs. Bitter on her tongue, it numbed some of the pain in her body. When Daenerys's head felt less light, Melisandre spoke. You must learn to channel the flame without letting it consume you. Your blood, the blood of the dragon, is powerful, but it can lead to destruction if you do not harness it properly. Daenerys listened, uncertain what the Red Priestess intended. She had commanded armies and dragons alike, but now she felt like a child fumbling in the dark. She recalled her first days among the Dothraki, her fear and determination. This was similar, yet altogether more unsettling. She had died. She had been pulled from the void. Now she must learn how to be a queen again. Stand, Melisandre commanded. Daenerys tried. Pain lanced her side, but she bit back a groan. Each breath came easier than the day before, as though her body were weaving itself back together. She leaned on the rough stone wall for balance. "What do you feel?" Melisandre asked. Daenerys furrowed her brow. "Weak. Tired." "No," the Red Woman countered. "Look deeper. Reach beyond your physical frame. There is a warmth in you, a spark. The dragons are not gone from this world. Their bond with you is ancient, forged in fire. Listen to that bond." Daenerys closed her eyes, trying to calm her ragged breathing. She pictured Drogon, Regal, and Viserion. She felt the flutter of memory when they were hatchlings, how their presence filled her with awe. She remembered how the warmth of their breath felt on her skin. In that moment, a flicker in her chest, like a tiny coal stirring into life, ignited. She gasped. Melisandre's voice softened. "Yes, that is the ember we must stoke. Without it, the realm will devour itself. The others were only the beginning. The power that threatened the living world lingers in hidden corners, waiting. We will need your dragons again, Daenerys Stormborn, and we will need your unwavering will." Daenerys swayed slightly. She did not understand everything that Melisandre spoke of, some new darkness gathering, perhaps. Her mind was still clouded by the fresh sting of betrayal and the memory of how her quest had ended. But the notion of reconnecting with her dragons, that at least felt right. They were part of her soul. They spent days beneath Dragonstone, in the twisting warrens and forgotten passages. Melisandre's acolytes lit the corridors with torches. The echo of chanting prayers sometimes reached Daenerys' ears as the faithful invoked the Lord of Light. Each morning, Daenerys practiced walking farther, letting her strength return. The wound on her torso healed with surprising speed, leaving only a faint mark, a ghost of the mortal blow she had sustained. At night, Melisandre recited ancient texts about fire and shadow, about the perils that lurked beyond mortal sight. Occasionally, she asked Daenerys to immerse her hands in a shallow bowl of flame-kissed water. The heat reddened Daenerys' skin, but never burned. And each time, Daenerys felt that subtle hum in her chest, as if her bond with the dragons were slowly knitting back together. Eventually, one evening, as she lay on the rough pallet, Daenerys heard it, a distant roar that reverberated through the stone. She sat bolt upright, heart hammering. She knew that roar. She had felt it in her bones 1,000 times. "Drogon!" She rushed to her feet, ignoring the stab of lingering pain. Melisandre emerged from the shadows, eyes glinting. "He calls," she murmured. Daenerys' heart surged. She realized with a sudden clarity that she had believed she might never see him again. Despite the bitterness, the heartbreak, the chaos she had wrought, she had always loved her dragon with a fierce devotion. She made for the exit, leaving behind the catacombs and ignoring Melisandre's cautionary hiss. The corridors twisted upward until she reached an old postern door leading onto a narrow ledge outside the fortress. Night wind whipped her hair. The sea below crashed against volcanic cliffs. Above, the moon glimmered, half buried behind clouds. Then she saw him, a black shape outlined against the sky, vast wings outstretched, a serpentine neck craning in her direction. "Drogon!" His roar shook the very walls of Dragonstone. Daenerys stumbled forward, overcome by emotion. She raised her arms, tears threatening her vision. He circled once, roaring again. His eyes, blazing gold, fixed upon her. Then he descended, talons scraping the stone with a shriek of metal on rock. The sheer size of him was overwhelming, far larger than she remembered, or so it seemed in this moment. For a heartbeat, Daenerys feared he might incinerate her where she stood. She recalled how he had melted the Iron Throne in a fury of grief. But she did not move. She forced herself to remain. He opened his maw, revealing rows of pointed teeth. Smoke curled from his nostrils. She sensed his confusion, his anger, his longing. Daenerys took a slow step forward, raising a trembling hand. The wind whipped at her clothes, swirling strands of her silver hair into her face. She whispered, "I am here." Drogon snorted, heat rippling across Daenerys' skin. For one dreadful moment, she thought he might reject her, that he would see her as an aberration, a revenant of the queen he had loved and lost. But then he lowered his massive head. His breath, hot and sulphurous, washed over her. Cautiously, Daenerys placed her palm against his scaled snout. A sob escaped her, and she pressed her forehead to his warm hide. Somewhere behind her, she sensed Melisandre's presence. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Drogon rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that resonated like thunder. Daenerys closed her eyes, letting the tears slip free. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She did not know precisely why she was apologizing, whether for her death, for the fury she unleashed, or for the lost souls that had burned in King's Landing. Perhaps for everything. But Drogon exhaled softly, and in that exhale she heard acceptance. When Daenerys finally turned, Melisandre stood behind her, arms folded in her red robes. The priestess's lips curved in a hint of satisfaction. "The bond endures," she said softly. Daenerys nodded, stroking Drogon's scales. She felt a measure of her old certainty returning. She was the mother of dragons, after all. She had come back from death, and her child of fire had recognized her once more. Despite her shame, despite the memories of King's Landing, there was a small spark of hope in her heart. The next few days unfolded in a whirlwind. Drogon took to haunting the skies around Dragonstone, occasionally perched on the outer walls, bellowing at gulls and drifting clouds. Daenerys spent time letting him grow accustomed to her presence anew. Though they had once flown across half the world together, now there was a hesitancy between them, as if he sensed that she had crossed a threshold from which no mortal truly returns. But with each passing day, that awkwardness melted away. Meanwhile, Melisandre guided Daenerys through rituals that drew upon fire and faith. "You must understand," Melisandre said one night as they stood by a blazing brazier in the Great Hall, "this is no simple quest for a throne. The fate of the living world hinges on the power you wield. You cannot repeat the mistakes of old." Daenerys stared into the flames. She saw the shapes that danced among the embers, though they were fleeting, half-formed. She saw the outline of a direwolf's head, then the silhouette of an iron crown, then a swirl of darkness that made her shudder. "I don't know if I can rule without fear. Last time." Melisandre placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your past does not define you, Daenerys Stormborn. The Lord of Light has given you a second chance. Seize it, and when the time comes, you must be as strong as the dragon you ride. Do not let guilt chain your hands from doing what must be done." Daenerys turned, meeting the priestess's gaze. "I came here with the dream of liberating the realm from tyranny. Perhaps I became a tyrant in the process. Can I truly do better?" "You can," Melisandre said. "And you must." There was no simple comfort in those words, but Daenerys found a measure of resolve. She remembered the years she spent in Essos, freeing slaves, forging alliances, learning the cost of mercy. She also remembered how that path had ended at the doors of the Red Keep. But she was no longer that person, at least she prayed she wasn't. Her first test of leadership came a week later when Melisandre's acolytes reported sightings of strangers on the shores of Dragonstone. Daenerys donned a cloak and ventured out with a small party, her footsteps echoing on the beach at low tide. The wind whipped her hair as she saw 3 rowboats drawn onto the sand, each bearing figures huddled in travel-worn cloaks. They had no banners, no armor, but they knelt when they saw Daenerys approach. Their leader was a gaunt man with a seamed face. He identified himself as one of the old Targaryen loyalists who had remained hidden after her fall, scattered among the corners of Westeros. Upon hearing rumors that the Dragon Queen lived once more, they came to pledge themselves to her cause. Daenerys felt a pang at the sight of them, men and women who had given up everything, who had hidden in the shadows for months, perhaps years, waiting for a sign that the Targaryen line might rise again. She recalled the illusions she once held of absolute loyalty. It had driven her to extremes. Yet here they were, half-starved, eyes shining with desperate hope. She could have commanded them to rebuild her armies, to swear unswerving fealty just as she had done before. But the memory of the Red Keep's throne room, the fear she had seen in people's faces, stayed her hand. Instead, she knelt on the wet sand, placing herself at their level. She asked them their names, listened to their stories. She thanked them for coming, yet she made no demands. She only said, "I am here to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If you wish to join me in that cause, I welcome you. But if you seek conquest for its own sake, I will not repeat the sins of my past." Melisandre, standing behind Daenerys, said nothing, but Daenerys could feel her measuring gaze. The loyalists clasped Daenerys' hands, murmuring their gratitude. For the first time since her resurrection, Daenerys felt a glimmer of something she had feared lost. The capacity to inspire devotion without ruling through fear. It was fragile, like a candle flame in a drafty hall, but it was there. They brought the loyalists to the halls of Dragonstone, offering food and shelter. News of Daenerys' return began to spread in subtle ways. Runners, whispers, travelers on the roads. Melisandre's acolytes carried messages through secret channels. It was said that the Mother of Dragons lived, an omen that shook the uneasy calm of the realm. Daenerys worried that word would reach those who would see her undone. The lords who had once rallied against her, the new powers that had emerged after her death. But Melisandre insisted that time was of the essence. "You cannot hide in these catacombs forever," she told Daenerys. "If there is a coming storm, you must stand before it as the breaker, not cower in the shadows." So Daenerys stood on the ramparts of Dragonstone one morning, dressed in simple leathers. Drogon perched beside her, scanning the seas for threats. The old fortress felt less oppressive now, though it still loomed with its carved stone dragons. Her loyalists moved through its halls, forging alliances with Melisandre's followers. The storehouses were slowly filled with fish from the sea and supplies from hidden contacts on the mainland. One day, she knew, she would have to leave Dragonstone and step back into the world of lords and kings. But not yet. She had to be certain of her footing. She had to be certain of herself. In the quiet that followed, as the tides ebbed and flowed, Daenerys practiced controlling her impulses and focusing her empathy. She found that in her death and resurrection, some intangible barrier had cracked within her. She was more aware of the cost of destruction. She no longer felt the driving fury that once propelled her to incinerate entire armies. She recognized the darkness that lurked in corners of her own heart, and she vowed never again to let that darkness reign over her. She spent long hours with Drogon, flying over the choppy waters, reacquainting herself with the joys and dangers of the open sky. Sometimes, the Red Woman flew with her, gripping Daenerys' waist. Melisandre whispered her prophecies against the roaring wind, speaking of the Watchers in the north, of shadows in the east, of an ancient power that slumbered beneath the waves. Many of the riddles made little sense to Daenerys, but she listened with patience. She could not ignore the possibility that a greater threat loomed on the horizon. One evening after a flight, Daenerys landed Drogon on the high battlements. She dismounted, letting the wind tousle her hair. She gazed out across the sea and saw another dragon in her mind's eye. Regal, lost in battle, and Viserion, taken by the Night King. Grief welled inside her, but she steadied herself. She had one dragon left, and that would have to be enough. She noticed Melisandre standing near the edges of the courtyard, her eyes distant as if she saw something beyond mortal sight. Daenerys approached, heart-thumping. She could feel a tension in the air, like a held breath. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Melisandre's voice was subdued, distant. A vision. The flames spoke of Watchers in the darkness. Agents of an old god, or perhaps an old evil. "My queen, you must prepare yourself. War is coming." Daenerys' chest tightened. She recalled the war she had once fought against the Night King. Hadn't they defeated that threat? "I thought the dead were banished when the Night King fell." "They were," Melisandre said, turning to face Daenerys. The priestess's eyes were filled with a solemn glow. "But other evils linger. The Lord of Shadows beyond the seas. The half-forgotten terrors of Valyria. The worshippers of demon gods in the Far East. The threat is not a single army, but a tide of darkness that would devour all if left unchecked. We are but keepers of the flame. You most of all." Daenerys felt her courage stir, that old readiness to battle the impossible. She had once believed she would change the world. Perhaps that was still her destiny, albeit with a different approach. "Then we shall be ready." Melisandre nodded, though a flicker of something worry, passed across her face. "We must gather allies. The realm has scattered. Even the north has pulled away. You will need more than a handful of loyalists." At the mention of the north, Daenerys' heart twisted with memories of Jon Snow. She recalled the nights they spent together, the sense of belonging she once felt. Then she remembered his betrayal, the sharp sting of his knife. Her expression hardened. She did not know if she was ready to face him again or if she could ever trust him. But if the realm was in danger, perhaps she had no choice. "Let us see who will answer my call," she said softly. In the weeks that followed, Melisandre's red acolytes traveled to ports along the narrow sea, passing messages to merchants and sailors, discreetly summoning old supporters of House Targaryen to Dragonstone. Not everyone answered, of course. Some had sworn fealty to a new order. Others hated the memory of the Dragon Queen who had raised King's Landing. But a trickle of ships began arriving, bearing warriors and refugees alike, each with their own reasons to seek Daenerys Stormborn's protection. She met them in the courtyard beneath Drogon's watchful gaze, offering what she could: safety, guidance, a chance to stand for something greater than themselves. Some came with timidity, uncertain if they were walking into the lair of a monster. Others pledged fealty immediately, seeing in Daenerys the last living Targaryen who might restore the old bloodline. She tried to accept their pledges with humility, always mindful of what her pride had once cost. One such arrival was a young woman named Bara, scarcely out of girlhood, who had lost her family when King's Landing burned. Tears filled her eyes as she told Daenerys how the flames had consumed her home. Yet Bara had come regardless, seeking a new life. "I heard you were dead," Bara said, voice trembling. "But they say you've risen again. I came because I believe you can do better this time. I want to see it." Daenerys felt her heart twist with guilt and a strange measure of gratitude. "I will do better," she said, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "I promise." The moment was interrupted by cries from the sentries atop the walls. Daenerys turned to see a sail on the horizon, a single ship with dark masts. As the vessel drew closer, it raised a familiar banner, black, with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Daenerys's pulse quickened. Another old loyalist, or something else? A short time later, the ship anchored and a small rowboat approached the docks. Daenerys strode out with Melisandre and a handful of guards. The figure who disembarked was tall, hooded. Only when they drew back their cowl did Daenerys recognize the lined face, the haunted eyes. It was Grey Worm. Shock and emotion warred within Daenerys. Grey Worm had led the Unsullied, had been her most loyal soldier and commander. After her death, he had taken the Unsullied and the surviving Dothraki east, vowing never to return to Westeros. Yet here he was, alone, looking older than his years, a faint limp in his gait. Daenerys's throat felt suddenly tight. He approached with measured steps, eyes never leaving her face. Slowly, he bent his knee, bowing his head in the gesture of the Unsullied. "My queen." Tears blurred Daenerys's vision. She placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Grey Worm," she whispered. Why have you come?" He looked up, his voice rasping with emotion. "I heard whispers across the sea. A red priestess claiming the Dragon Queen lives again. At first, I did not believe. I did not want to believe. But I had to see." He paused, swallowing hard. "The Unsullied are scattered. Many lost the will to fight after you were gone. I wandered, searching for something to give our lives meaning again. This is all that is left of us." Daenerys's gaze flicked past him, seeing no other Unsullied on the boat. Her heart lurched. They had been her shield, her sword. They had followed her beyond the known world. The rest? Some remain in Noth to protect the peaceful folk. Others died on the journey or drifted away in the corners of Essos. "We have no city, no queen." He clenched his jaw. "Until now." Daenerys took a moment to compose herself. She felt the swirl of guilt, remembering how her last commands had driven the Unsullied to acts of vengeance in King's Landing. Had she done right by them? Or had she led them astray? The knowledge that some found a different path, that some returned to Noth to fulfill Missandei's dream, tugged at her heart. But here was Grey Worm, seeking a purpose he thought he had lost. Gently, she helped him to his feet. "I do live," she said, emotion coloring her tone. "But I am not the queen you once knew. I have changed." Grey Worm nodded, grim lines on his face. "I can see that. But you are still Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons." She exhaled, turning to gaze at Drogon, perched atop the fortress. "Yes. And I mean to stand against a new threat. One that may swallow us all if we do nothing. Will you join me?" Grey Worm bowed his head again. "I have nowhere else to go." A flicker of sorrow ghosted across Daenerys's features. She reached out and clasped Grey Worm's forearm. "You will always have a place at my side," she said. "But this time I will earn your loyalty by building a fairer world, not by burning the old one." Grey Worm's face softened, just a little. There was a shadow of relief, or perhaps understanding, in his eyes. "Tell me what needs to be done." Thus, Grey Worm became her marshal, training the ragtag soldiers who arrived at Dragonstone, forging them into some semblance of an army. The Loyalists looked upon the famed commander of the Unsullied with awe, though they were few in number. Daenerys watched him drill them in the courtyard, remembering the unstoppable phalanxes she once commanded. Now she had only a handful of seasoned fighters and recruits, but it was a start. As the weeks passed, the trickle of arrivals continued. Rumors of Daenerys' resurrection spread like wildfire, igniting equal parts fear and hope throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Some powerful lords sent envoys to Dragonstone, curious to see if the stories were true. Others rallied armies to defend their lands in case the Dragon Queen attempted another conquest. Daenerys did not march on them. She chose diplomacy first, seeking peaceful audiences. Her envoys carried letters promising no retribution for the past, only a shared desire to confront the threats that loomed beyond the horizon. Here and there, she won new allies, smaller houses that recalled the Targaryen name with some affection, or lords who deemed it wiser to hedge their bets. She also accumulated enemies, those who doubted her transformation and saw only the queen who burned King's Landing. Through it all, Melisandre stood at Daenerys' side, a silent pillar of flame-touched certainty. Late one night, Daenerys found herself on the battlements again, the salt wind stinging her cheeks. She gazed across the dark sea, her mind thick with thought. The world had seemed more straightforward when she was younger: break the chains, seize the throne, rule with justice. Now everything was tangled in the memory of her downfall. Each day demanded caution, humility, and the awareness that her second life came with a heavy price. She bore the scars of betrayal, her own and others. In the gloom, she sensed rather than saw Melisandre's approach. The priestess's robes rustled softly. "You are restless, my queen?" Daenerys nodded, arms folded atop the cold stone rampart. "I am. I want to do right this time, but I feel the weight of what I've done. Will the realm ever forgive me?" Melisandre's voice was gentle. "They may not need to forgive you. Forgiveness is a gift seldom granted by mortals. What matters is whether you will do what must be done." Daenerys turned, moonlight catching the silver in her hair. "And what is that? Another war? More blood spilled?" She sighed. "If these shadows you speak of come, I will fight them. But I do not relish the idea of bathing the realm in fire again." Melisandre's dark eyes flicked to the distant horizon. "When the time comes, fire will be your greatest weapon. But it need not be indiscriminate. Your dragons can protect as well as destroy. Do not fear your own power." Daenerys closed her eyes briefly, inhaling the night air. "I spent so long believing power was my birthright. Perhaps that was my downfall." "Power itself is not evil," Melisandre said. "It is the one who wields it who shapes its purpose. You have been given a chance to reshape yours. Do not dwell on the ashes behind you, or you will never see the dawn ahead." The words stirred something in Daenerys' chest. She could sense the sincerity in Melisandre's tone, the unwavering faith in the Lord of Light's design. And though she was not entirely sure she believed in divine purpose, she did believe in the need to protect the realm. She believed in forging a future that might stand against whatever darkness threatened. In that moment, she recalled the day she first walked through Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, emerging unburnt with her baby dragons. The sense of wonder and destiny had been so strong then. Now she had emerged from the ashes of death itself. Perhaps she still had a destiny to fulfill. She opened her eyes, letting her gaze wander to where Drogon slumbered in the courtyard below, a massive shape curled like a black mountain. "I will stand," she whispered, more to herself than to Melisandre. "I will not run from what must be done." A faint smile touched Melisandre's lips. "Then all that remains is to guide the realm to your side and to defeat the shadows when they come." The song of ice and fire goes on. You are its latest verse. Daenerys wondered if the mention of ice and fire was a subtle reminder of Jon Snow. The memory still ached, a bruise on her heart. But she set that aside for now. She had more pressing concerns than the man who had killed her out of what he believed was necessity. If the realm was in danger, they would all need to stand together or see the living world torn asunder. "Tomorrow," Daenerys said, "I will fly to the mainland with Grey Worm and a small guard. We will begin forging alliances in earnest. I will speak to the lords face to face. I will show them that I am not a terror come to burn them all." Melisandre inclined her head. "The realm will see the change in you if you show them honesty and resolve. Go with the Lord of Light's blessing. I will remain here for a time to tend the fires and gather more acolytes." Daenerys brushed the stone with her fingertips, feeling the roughness of it. She thought of Dragonstone, of the winding corridors and the catacombs where she had awakened to life again. She thought of all she had lost and all she had gained. Then she straightened. "We will not fail," she said softly. She did not know if she was reassuring Melisandre or herself. The priestess's eyes gleamed like rubies in the moonlight. "No, you will not." The wind caught Daenerys' hair, tossing it around her face as she glanced out once more at the sea. She felt the flame inside her, that old, unstoppable heat that once propelled her across continents. It was tempered now with grief and humility, but it still burned. She would use it to protect, not to destroy. If she had been given a second life, then let it be one devoted to the realm's salvation. At dawn, she and Grey Worm prepared to depart. Drogon, sensing her intention, beat his massive wings in excitement. A small band of mounted warriors rode out to the shore, bearing the Targaryen banner. Daenerys took a moment to walk among them, offering them words of encouragement. They looked upon her with various expressions, some with awe, some with wary curiosity. She was, after all, the queen who had died and returned. But they followed her. That was enough for now. Grey Worm stood by the water's edge, his spear in hand. A handful of Unsullied had come with him, 7 men, all that remained of a legion. They stood at rigid attention, waiting for Daenerys' command. She dipped her head to them, recalling the thousands who once marched at her side. She had to swallow a lump of sorrow before speaking. Then she turned and climbed onto Drogon's back, the rough texture of his scales familiar beneath her palms. Grey Worm and the others would take the ship following along the coast. Daenerys preferred the skies both for speed and for the sense of freedom it afforded her. She nodded to Grey Worm, who bowed in return, and then she urged Drogon upward. He roared, launching off the beach in a spray of sand and salt water. Daenerys felt the wind tear at her clothes and hair, saw the world drop away beneath her. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring the rush. It was no longer the pure exultation of power she once felt, but there was a strange peace in it. She was herself again, reborn, scarred, but determined. As Drogon winged across the sky, the sun rising at their backs, Daenerys gazed at the mainland of Westeros. She caught sight of rolling hills and patchwork fields, tiny figures going about their lives below. These were the people she sought to protect. She had destroyed for them once in the name of a dream. Now she would fight for them in a different way. The prophecy of a new darkness weighed on her mind, but she refused to let fear guide her. Let them see the Dragon Queen as she truly was. Not a vengeful conqueror, but a woman shaped by fire, determined to save them from the shadows that crept closer with each passing day. She did not know if they would accept her or if she would be met with steel and scorn. But she would try. Ahead, the horizon stretched wide, a canvas of possibilities. Daenerys felt the warmth in her blood, the spark that had refused to die even in the face of oblivion. She guided Drogon forward, a slender figure astride a beast of legend. One queen, one dragon, reborn into a world that was not done with them yet. She was Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the unburnt, the mother of dragons, and perhaps this time, she would be the savior rather than the scourge. The wind rushed around her, carrying the faint echo of her own heartbeat. With each beat, the path ahead grew clearer. She would stand against the encroaching darkness, reclaim the trust of the realm if she could, and reignite the dream of a world freed from the old, corrupt wheel of suffering. Fire was hers to command, and she would wield it, yes, but with caution and purpose, forging alliances instead of sowing terror. She rode onward toward her uncertain destiny, a living flame in a land still haunted by winter's chill. The future was unwritten, and that meant it might yet be shaped into something good. If Melisandre's visions were true, if the world needed a champion against the shadows, then Daenerys Stormborn would answer that call. She had once walked into fire to birth dragons. Now, she would walk through the fires of redemption, determined that this time, she would emerge the queen the realm deserved. She pressed her knees to Drogon's flanks, urging him faster. The wind carried away her whispered vow. Dracarys, she murmured, but it was no longer a cry for destruction. It was a promise that her fire would burn away the encroaching darkness, light a path for those who followed, and blaze a new chapter in the Song of Ice and Fire. Reasoned about Daenerys' resurrection and redemption for 10 seconds. Daenerys soared on Drogon's back with the wind in her hair and a hint of salt on her lips. The coastline of the Crownlands spread out beneath her, a patchwork of farmlands, woodlands, and winding roads that glimmered faintly under the morning sun. This was a land she had once approached with an army at her heels, a land she had burned in her quest for the Iron Throne. Now, she returned with only a handful of followers and a resolve shaped by regret, tempered by the knowledge that unbridled fury would never again be her path. She kept her eyes on the horizon, where green fields gave way to distant rolling hills. Drogon felt steady beneath her, his vast wings beating in a slow, patient rhythm. She sensed that he too had changed, his savage temper tempered by grief, his devotion to her honed by loss. He angled slightly, responding to the subtle shift in her weight. Together, they glided down the coastline, scanning for the small ship bearing Grey Worm and the loyalists who would soon land on the same shores. She saw no sails yet, so she nudged Drogon inland, letting him cruise over farmland dotted with sheep. Peasants in the fields stumbled back at the sight of the colossal dragon overhead. Some cowered, dropping their tools. Others merely stood frozen, eyes wide and faces pale. Daenerys felt a faint pang. She remembered the terror she had once inspired, and for a moment, she worried these folk might think she had returned to incinerate them. That memory tightened her chest. Yet she did not direct Drogon to roar or descend in a show of force. Instead, She let him glide at a height that would not scorch the fields, making no aggressive moves. She had no interest in terrifying the small folk or reminding them of King's Landing in flames. She offered only a silent prayer that they might see she had come in peace. The heat of Drogon's scales radiated through her riding leathers. She recalled the war councils and the clangor of armies that had once marched in her name. Now all of that felt distant, as though belonging to another life. Perhaps it did. She steered Drogon back toward the shore, scanning for a suitable landing spot. Below, a lonely cliff jutted out, flanked by wind-lashed gorse. She guided the dragon down, letting him alight on the rocky promontory. He folded his wings, sending small stones tumbling into the sea far below. Daenerys eased herself off his back and steadied her feet on the uneven ground. The wind tugged her hair across her face. She felt the sea spray from below, tasted its brine on her lips. Once she regained her balance, she stroked Drogon's flank, whispering to him in the old Valyrian words she used to calm her dragons in Essos. He blinked those golden eyes, gave a low rumble that stirred her heart. There on the cliff, with the ocean's roar in her ears, she allowed herself a moment to collect her thoughts. She would have to reach out to the lords of the Crownlands carefully. The memory of her conquest was too fresh, even if time had passed since her death. She had to show them that she was not the same queen who had raised half a city in a rush of fury. But how could she prove such a thing except by action? She thought of her allies. Grey Worm would land soon with a small contingent bearing banners of Targaryen black. Even that might provoke fear. She knew that some lords might try to mobilize their own forces against her the instant they saw the dragon overhead. A part of her wanted to call on her old counselors Tyrion, Varys, Ser Barristan, but they were either gone, dead, or estranged. She stood alone. Her eyes drifted to the western roads. Far beyond those rolling hills, King's Landing sprawled like a labyrinth of stone. The city still existed, presumably under the rule of a new king, possibly King Bran the Broken if the stories held true, or some other arrangement set after her passing. Her breath caught at the thought of approaching those walls again. She pictured the charred ruins, the ashen remnants of buildings, and the anguished faces of survivors. It was a memory she would never escape, no matter how fervently she might wish to. She forced herself to exhale. She had no intention of simply flying there unannounced and repeating old mistakes. Change demanded caution and empathy. Instead, she would begin with smaller steps, forging alliances among minor lords, building trust from the ground up, not from the top down. Word would spread, and in time, perhaps King's Landing itself would open its gates to her. For now, she could only focus on what lay directly before her. She mounted Drogon again, urging him gently into the air. He responded with a mighty shove of his hind legs, beating his wings until they rose above the cliff. The sea stretched out behind them like a glittering swath of broken glass. She flew a short distance along the coast, searching for any sign of sails. At last, she spotted a single mast on the horizon, gliding through calm waters. She recognized the battered vessel that Grey Worm had taken from Dragonstone, the black Targaryen sigil flapping from the stern. He would be landing at a sheltered cove before riding inland to meet her. Relieved, she guided Drogon to circle overhead, ensuring that no immediate threats waited on the beach. A few fishermen on the shore scattered at the dragon's approach, but there was no sign of an armed force. She watched from above as Grey Worm and his small band of Unsullied rowed ashore and began unloading the horses. Once it seemed safe, Daenerys angled Drogon away, wanting to spare the fishermen any heart-stopping terror of a full draconic descent. She made a wide pass and landed on a gentle sloping bluff where the grass rustled in the morning breeze. From this vantage, she could see the rowboat, the figures disembarking, the horses pacing nervously at the waves' lapping edges. In time, Grey Worm led the group up from the cove onto a coastal path that wound away from the beach. Daenerys dismounted and walked to meet them. The grass was wet with dew, chilling her ankles. Morning light fell across her shoulders. One of the Unsullied spotted her and raised a hand in silent salute. Grey Worm followed his gaze, then left the main group to approach her. His leathers and simple cloak bore the stains of seawater and travel. She noticed lines of weariness etched around his eyes, the faint slump in his posture. Yet when he reached her, he saluted in that crisp, unsullied style she remembered so well. "My queen," he murmured. She gently set a hand on his forearm in greeting. "Grey Worm, any trouble crossing?" "No trouble," he said. The seas were calm. He lifted his gaze. "We saw farmers along the shore. They seemed frightened. Word will spread fast that the dragon has come." She nodded, glancing across the rolling hills. "I expect so." Let them spread the tale. I've no wish to hide. He inclined his head, then looked around. Where do we go from here? Daenerys folded her arms over her chest, feeling a faint flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. She had never been one to shrink from action, but caution felt necessary now. We'll move north toward Rosby and nearby keeps. Some of their lords and stewards might remember the days of Targaryen rule with less hatred than those closer to King's Landing. If we arrive with a small escort and Drogon overhead, we can make a case for peaceful dialogue. Grey Worm listened carefully. In the old days, she would have commanded him with absolute conviction, and he would have obeyed without question. Now she sensed a shift in their dynamic. He was still loyal, but they had both seen the extremes of her wrath. He wanted to know her intentions clearly. We'll follow your lead, he said quietly. But we should be prepared if they respond with aggression. I can position our few men on the approach roads to discourage any open attack. Daenerys nodded. Yes, but no bloodshed unless we have no choice. I want them to see that we are not here as conquerors. Grey Worm's mouth thinned slightly as though a dozen arguments danced behind his eyes. But he merely bowed his head. As you command. She offered him a small smile, grateful for his trust. Let us ride then. We'll keep Drogon near, but not so close as to terrify every farmer in sight. Together, they mounted the horses that the Unsullied had brought from the ship. Daenerys's mare snorted, skittish at the smell of the dragon lingering on her cloak. She soothed the animal with calm words, then nudged it into motion. Drogon lifted off the bluff in a swirl of wind and soared overhead, his shadow rippling across the grasslands. The small party set out inland along a dirt road, which soon branched off toward a cluster of low hills crowned by a modest keep, a holding that Daenerys suspected belonged to a minor house sworn to the crown. Her heart pulsed with a familiar rush at the prospect of meeting lords who might revile her for the events in King's Landing. Yet she forced herself to remain steady. She would show them the queen she had become. If they refused to see it, she would try again. The keep came into view after a couple of hours' ride, perched on a gentle rise overlooking farmland. A rickety wooden palisade encircled it, more of a symbolic boundary than a true defense. Beyond, they could see a courtyard with a scattering of outbuildings. A single gate, flanked by wary guards, opened onto the road. Daenerys paused her party at a respectful distance. Grey Worm studied the guards, who gripped spears and exchanged anxious glances. They clearly recognized the Targaryen banner, if not the queen herself. And if they hadn't, Drogon's silhouette overhead would have dispelled any confusion. Daenerys took a breath, then urged her mare forward. She raised a gloved hand to signal the guards. I come in peace. I seek only an audience with your lord or lady. Her voice carried in the still air. One guard stepped forward, a man with a scraggly beard that did little to hide his uneasy expression. And who are you? Daenerys slipped back her hood. Her silver hair tumbled free, a telling sign for anyone who remembered the Targaryen lineage. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, Mother of Dragons. I would speak to whoever holds this keep. At those words, the guard's eyes widened. He swiveled his gaze to the enormous beast circling above, then looked back at the small retinue of unsmiling Unsullied. He swallowed, took a half-step back. The queen. They said you were dead. I was. She kept her tone calm, though she saw the alarm on his face. But I stand before you now, alive. Will you grant me safe entry? The guard hesitated, turning to glance at his fellow watchman. The second guard had grown pale, clearly uncertain whether to greet her or flee. Daenerys let the moment stretch without pressing. Finally, the first guard cleared his throat and waved her forward. I'll announce you. The keep belongs to Lord Gramercy. It's his seat. Daenerys urged her mare into a measured walk. Grey Worm and the rest followed at her flanks, their weapons sheathed. She prayed that this gesture of non-hostility would be enough to prevent panic inside the keep. The gates creaked open, revealing a modest courtyard with scattered chickens. A stable boy peered from behind a bale of hay, wide-eyed. A few men-at-arms clutched spears near the entry to the main hall, clearly unnerved by the sight of the Unsullied. Beyond them, a squat tower of gray stone rose up, the highest structure on the grounds. Word traveled quickly. By the time Daenerys dismounted, a middle-aged man in plain but well-tailored garb had emerged from the hall. He wore a short cloak pinned with a bronze clasp, and his thinning hair was combed carefully over his scalp in an effort to hide a bald patch. He approached, his brow furrowing as he tried to maintain composure. "My lord," the guard from the gate said, gesturing stiffly, she says she's Daenerys Targaryen." The man paused, his gaze traveling over Daenerys's silver hair, then over the unsullied, then flicking upward toward the shadow of Drogon passing overhead. He swallowed audibly. "My lady, my queen? You will forgive me if I am at a loss for proper greetings. One hears so many rumors." Daenerys folded her hands before her, offering a nod. "I understand it must be a shock. I appreciate your willingness to receive me, Lord Gramercy." "I am indeed Lord Gramercy," he said. His voice quavered slightly, but he strove for dignity. "Formerly sworn to the Iron Throne under the rule of King Bran. Now I am a caretaker of these lands, trying to keep them safe." He paused, letting his eyes rest on Daenerys. She could sense the question in his mind. How was it that she still lived? And what did she intend for them now? She gave him a measured look. "My lord, I come not as a conqueror, but as a protector. I have news that threatens all of Westeros, a new darkness that gathers. I would have your ear, and if you find my words sincere, I would have your cooperation." He stood there, uncertain for a time. Then, with a halting gesture, he ushered her toward the hall. She followed, Grey Worm and 2 Unsullied in step behind her, while the remainder stayed in the courtyard with the horses. Inside, the main hall was simple, with a flagstone floor and sturdy rafters overhead. The walls bore a handful of local banners and the Gramercy sigil, a brown oak tree on a pale green field. Daenerys noted the presence of half a dozen men in boiled leather, presumably the Lord's Guard. They cast uneasy glances at her and Grey Worm, but made no move to bar them. At the far end of the hall stood a modest dais with an oaken chair. Lord Gramercy waved a hand, indicating Daenerys should stand before it while he took his seat. She inclined her head, neither offended nor surprised. In days past, she would have demanded the seat for herself as the rightful queen, but she reminded herself to practice the humility she had sworn to uphold. Lord Gramercy settled into the chair, leaning forward. "I remember King's Landing in flames." His tone was quiet yet firm. "I remember the stories that reached us here of your dragon's wrath. Why have you returned, and how?" Daenerys did not flinch from his gaze. "I will not deny what happened in King's Landing, my lord. I brought my armies here to end tyranny, and in my grief and anger I went too far. I cannot reclaim those lost lives. For that I am deeply sorry." She paused, letting the words settle. "As for my return, I was indeed killed, but a priestess of the Lord of Light brought me back. You may doubt such tales if you wish, yet here I stand. I do not come seeking vengeance or conquest. I seek to warn the realm that a new threat looms. There are forces, ancient, dark forces, that stir. My allies and I mean to gather what strength we can to face them." Silence hung in the hall. Some of the guards exchanged uncertain looks. Lord Gramercy tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. "I've heard rumors of your resurrection. I did not expect to see you with my own eyes. The realm has only recently begun to recover from one war. You speak of an ancient threat? We have heard such warnings before, the White Walkers, the Night King, but that terror ended with the last long night. Are you suggesting it will happen again?" Daenerys clasped her hands. "The Night King was not the only evil in this world. My Red Priestess has seen visions of horrors from the east, from the shadows beyond Valyria, from the lost corners of the far north. Darkness is not so easily vanquished. And even if I am proven wrong, is it not better to stand united? King Bran the Broken, if he still rules, would want the realm to be prepared." Another hush fell, broken only by the crackle of the small fire in the hearth. Daenerys watched the lines of tension deepen on Lord Gramercy's face. She could see the conflict in his eyes, fear of her, doubt about her warnings, and concern for his own people. At length, he exhaled softly. "If what you say is true, how do you intend to convince the lords of the land to unite behind you? Many still revile your name after King's Landing." She resisted the urge to bristle. "I will show them, through my actions, that I have changed. I will not burn their homes, I will not demand fealty by force. I will make my case openly, and if they refuse to listen, I will move on. But I hope that when they see I speak the truth, they will lend their voices to the defense of the realm." His gaze flickered. "And if they do not?" Grey Worm shifted at Daenerys' side, but Daenerys raised a hand slightly, signaling calm. "If they do not, then they can stand apart. I will not punish them for it. But if this darkness descends, they will have none but themselves to blame for the ruin that follows." Lord Gramercy fell silent again. Then he glanced around at his guard. "Leave us," he said quietly. The men hesitated, exchanging looks, but they obeyed and filed out the door. He waited until the last of them had gone, then leaned forward in his seat, lowering his voice. There are whispers from King's Landing, my queen. They say King Bran sits on the throne, though it is a different seat, not the melted iron throne you left behind. They say Tyrion Lannister is still Hand of the King. The realm limps along, but it's tenuous. Taxation is heavy to rebuild the city. Many lords grumble that the new king and his council do little for the outlying lands. If you are who you claim to be, and if you are sincere, there may be some who would rally to you. But you must know that the crown will not greet you with open arms. And the north is closed off, ruling itself under Queen Sansa Stark. There is talk of separating from the rest of the continent entirely. Daenerys' throat tightened at the mention of the Starks. She remembered how Jon Snow had urged her to show mercy in King's Landing, how Sansa had mistrusted her from the first. I see. Then we have little time to waste. If tensions already run high, the realm will be ill-prepared to face a greater threat. Lord Gramercy weighed her words, then rose slowly from his chair. My own forces are small and my coffers are not deep. Yet I do not care to see the realm descend into darkness. If you swear to harm none of my people and if you truly seek to protect these lands, I will grant you what small aid I can. I will spread word to the neighboring lords that you have come in peace, that you wish to warn the realm of looming peril. They may listen, they may not. But it is the best I can do. Daenerys bowed her head, genuine gratitude stirring in her chest. Thank you, my lord. I give you my word that I will not bring violence upon your people, nor upon any who offer me no harm. If there is a time we must fight, it will be to defend, not to conquer. He studied her for a long moment, as though searching her face for deception. Whatever he saw seemed to mollify him. He extended a tentative hand, and she shook it. Though it was hardly the vow of a sworn bannerman, it felt like a small beginning. She left Gramercy's keep shortly thereafter, her retinue intact and Drogon still circling overhead. The guard at the gate opened it wide, and Daenerys rode out with her company, feeling the eyes of the local folk upon her. She noted the wary expressions, the hushed whispers, the children peeking from behind doorways. She did not blame them for their fear. She wished she could gather each one and assure them that she was not here to unleash flames upon their homes. But words would never be enough, only time and restraint would prove her intentions. Beyond the keep, the road curved northward into rolling farmland. True to his word, Lord Gramercy had sent one of his men, a thin, wiry fellow named Cosgrove, to guide them toward the next cluster of minor holds. They traveled for days through sunlit fields and occasional patches of woodland, stopping at small settlements where Daenerys would speak to reeves, bailiffs, and local farmers. Some were awed by the dragon overhead, others cowered in terror, but she repeated her message wherever she went. She had been reborn, she sought to unite the realm against an oncoming threat. And she no longer embraced the savage conquest that had once marred her cause. It was slow, frustrating work. Many refused to believe her or greeted her with veiled hostility. Grey Worm's presence lent both caution and tension. More than once, a village elder insisted that Daenerys leave before nightfall, worried that her dragon might devour their livestock. Yet a handful listened. The seeds of a new reputation began to take root. She helped quell a band of outlaws that had been plaguing one hamlet, commanding Drogon to give a menacing roar from the skies, while Grey Worm and 2 Unsullied subdued the marauders on the ground. When the criminals were captured, Daenerys handed them over to the local reeve to be tried, refusing to mete out summary execution by dragonfire. It was a small but potent demonstration that she would no longer dispense draconic wrath as her first resort. The folk in that hamlet, Briston's Ford, spread word of how the Dragon Queen had helped them without burning their fields or demanding ruinous tribute. Another time, Daenerys found a farm scorched by bandits. She and her retinue helped extinguish the smoldering remains of the barn and guided the family to safety. One child asked if her dragon would eat them. Daenerys knelt and explained as kindly as she could that Drogon would hurt no one unless they threatened him or her people, and that she had come to protect. The fear in the child's eyes dimmed, replaced by tentative wonder. These were small gestures, but they mattered. Each act chipped away at the memory of the queen who had once rained fire upon a city. Yet beneath it all, Daenerys could not shake the sense of urgency. In quiet moments, she recalled Melisandre's warnings about a gathering darkness. Sometimes at night, she jolted awake from dreams of shadows creeping across the sea, nightmares of dragons fighting monstrous silhouettes in the sky. She had expected Melisandre to rejoin her eventually, but so far the priestess remained at Dragonstone, no doubt overseeing her own machinations to rally the followers of Lawler. Daenerys carried on, trusting that their paths would converge again when the time was right. 2 weeks into her journey through the Crownlands, she reached the outskirts of Duskandale, a slightly larger town with stone walls and a population that might remember the Targaryen name all too well. The memory of how Aerys II, Daenerys' father, had once been taken captive here by rebellious lords still lingered in local lore. Approaching the gates, Daenerys worried that the folk of Duskandale would see her only as the daughter of the Mad King or as the Mad Queen incarnate. But she had come too far to turn back. She reined in her horse and gazed at the gatehouse where the black banner of a crowned stag flew. That meant these lands now belonged to House Baratheon's newly recognized branch or had been sworn to the throne under a Baratheon banner at some point. The guard on duty, seeing her approach with a retinue of Unsullied and a great black dragon overhead, shouted a warning. Trumpets blared from the walls and she could see crossbowmen hastening to positions. Grey Worm tensed, glancing back at her for orders. "Hold," she said quietly. "We mean them no harm." He nodded, still gripping his spear. Daenerys rode a bit closer, lifting her voice. "People of Duskandale, I am Daenerys Targaryen. I wish to speak with your lord or your council. I come in peace." Someone atop the wall shouted, "Hold your ground." Crossbows trained on them. Daenerys remained very still, knowing how easily a misunderstanding could lead to bloodshed. At length, a man in partial armor, likely a captain of the guard, leaned over the battlements. "By all the gods, it's true? The Mad Queen lives again." His tone was thick with apprehension. "We'll see if you come in peace. Lay down your weapons and dismount." Daenerys exchanged a glance with Grey Worm. She saw the flicker of reluctance in his eyes. Unsullied did not typically relinquish their arms. But she gave him a small nod. They needed to show trust first. Grey Worm gestured for the Unsullied to set their spears aside. Daenerys swung off her horse, patting its neck to keep it calm. She lifted her hands to show she carried no weapon. "We have disarmed," she called. "May we parley?" The captain exchanged a few words with someone out of sight, then nodded. "You may. Approach slowly and your dragon stays outside the walls. One flicker of flame and we'll fill you with crossbow bolts." Daenerys stroked Drogon's scaled leg. He was perched behind them on a rocky outcrop, not keen on being surrounded by stone walls. She let her forehead rest against his warm hide. "I need you to wait for me here," she whispered in High Valyrian. He growled softly, annoyed. She pressed her hand to his snout, feeling his smoky breath. "Trust me, my friend. We will be safe." It was a risk. If these guards meant to betray her, she had only Grey Worm and a handful of Unsullied to protect her. But she had to believe that her willingness to stand unarmed would count for something. Finally, Drogon snorted and shifted, folding his wings against his sides and settling into a half-crouch. Daenerys turned away, steeling herself. The city gates opened cautiously and the guard captain led a few men out. They patted down Daenerys' retinue, searching for hidden blades. Finding none, they beckoned them inside. The crossbowmen above remained watchful. Daenerys' heart pounded, but she maintained a cool composure, head held high. She caught the murmurs of onlookers as they passed through the gate. "The Dragon Queen? But she's dead, is it truly her?" Seven hells, that beast is enormous. The main thoroughfare of Duskandale bustled with people pushing carts, hawkers selling produce, and beggars in ragged cloaks. Many shrank back when they recognized the silver-haired woman under escort. Children stared with open mouths. Daenerys met no hostility yet, only fear and curiosity. The guard captain brought them to a central courtyard bordered by the tall building that served as the local seat of governance. More soldiers waited with halberds forming a ring around the courtyard. Daenerys swallowed as she looked toward the building's entrance. A burly figure stepped out, wearing a brown surcoat with the sigil of a black stag's head. He was middle-aged, scarred across one cheek, and looked none too pleased to see her. "I am Ser Kylon Baratheon," he said. "Placed here by order of King Bran to oversee Duskandale. Let me see your face, woman." Daenerys obliged, pushing back her hood entirely. Her silver hair caught the daylight, her eyes fixed on Ser Kylon. He studied her features in silence, then shook his head. "By the gods, it's uncanny. You are the spitting image of your father's line." Daenerys resisted the urge to bristle. "I am who I claim to be, Ser Kylon, and I come not to fight." He regarded her retinue, then cast a wary glance at Drogon perched outside the walls. "You've a fine way of showing it. Any time a dragon flies overhead, it tends to put folk on edge." "I don't deny that," Daenerys said calmly. "That is why I come with a small escort, not an army. I bring warnings of danger to the realm, and I seek no bloodshed." Ser Kylon folded his arms. "The last time you visited a city in Westeros, you reduced it to ash. Forgive me if I'm skeptical." Daenerys met his gaze, letting a tinge of sorrow show in her eyes. "Your skepticism is warranted. I cannot erase what I did in King's Landing, but I have been granted a second chance, and I mean to use it to protect this realm. I humbly request an audience with you and your advisors so I may speak my piece and let you judge me by my present actions, not my past sins." The men who flanked Ser Kylon exchanged doubtful looks, but the burly knight finally gave a curt nod. Very well. You'll speak and then we'll see. But be warned, should any harm befall these people, I will end you myself, queen or no. Daenerys inclined her head, acknowledging the threat without flinching. Grey Worm tensed beside her, but said nothing. They were escorted into the council chambers, a simple but sturdy hall with a long wooden table. Ser Kylon sat at the head, flanked by a handful of local officials. A portly bailiff, a scribe with ink-stained fingers, a pair of guards. Daenerys and Grey Worm stood at the other end, their posture calm but resolute. The bailiff, clearing his throat, tried to maintain a semblance of protocol. Welcome to Duskandale, your grace. Please be seated, if Ser Kylon allows. Ser Kylon merely grunted and gestured for Daenerys to sit. She did so, Grey Worm standing behind her like a sentinel. The others settled into chairs, though tension bristled in the air. Daenerys took a slow breath, recalling the speeches she once made in Meereen, Astapor, and Yunkai when she sought to free the oppressed. This time, she was in a land with a different sort of wound, one she had partially inflicted herself. She gathered her courage. I know the realm sees me as the Mad Queen, the daughter of Ares II, the woman who burned King's Landing. I cannot undo those events, nor can I claim they were justified. All I can say is that I was lost in rage, grief, and betrayal. When I died, I believed that was my fate. But I have returned, granted life by the Lord of Light, who showed me that the realm still needs defending. There is a darkness on the rise, a threat unlike any we have faced since the long night. My Red Priestess has seen it in the flames, and I have chosen to heed that warning. I have come to gather allies, to mend what can be mended, and to defend these lands. I do not ask for your blind faith. I ask only that you listen, and that we might find common ground in protecting the people who will suffer if we do nothing. Silence greeted her words. Ser Kylon's jaw worked as though he were chewing over each syllable. The scribe looked uneasy, glancing at the bailiff, who in turn looked at Ser Kylon. Finally, Ser Kylon exhaled a long breath. A remarkable speech, yet it's built on the premise that we trust a Red Priestess's visions. The realm has had its fill of prophecies and wars. Why should we believe you? Why should King Bran or any of the great lords throw their strength behind you? Daenerys chose her words carefully. I do not ask for unconditional trust. I ask for the chance to prove my intentions. If the darkness I speak of fails to materialize, you lose nothing. You will have met with me, shared words, perhaps begun to rebuild bridges. But if I am right and we do nothing, tens of thousands could die. She paused, letting that sink in. Look around you. The realm is divided. The north stands apart. The crown demands rebuilding taxes. Lords grow restless under burdensome rule. When the realm is weak, darkness takes root. You need not call me your queen, but if you have any care for the future, you might at least consider alliance. Ser Kylon studied her for a moment, then turned to the bailiff and scribe. Fetch some refreshment for our guest. They nodded and hurried out. The guards shifted uneasily. Grey Worm remained still as stone, watchful. Ser Kylon tapped a finger on the table, gaze lingering on Daenerys' face. I recall hearing tales of you freeing slaves across the narrow sea. They said you had a good heart once, that you wanted to build a better world. Then came the sack of King's Landing. It's difficult to reconcile those two stories. Daenerys bowed her head. It is difficult for me as well. War changes us. Loss twists our hearts. I have regrets more than I can ever convey. But regret alone is not enough. I must act. That is all I can offer. The hall door opened and the scribe reappeared with a jug of watered wine and some bread on a tray. The mood remained tense, but Daenerys sensed a faint thaw in Ser Kylon's demeanor. He allowed the wine to be poured, then took a small cup. We have had no direct word from King's Landing in weeks. Couriers move slowly and there's talk of bandits on the roads. If what you say is true, that the realm might be in danger, I can at least pass word to King Bran's court that you have come to Duskandale peacefully, asking for a summit of sorts. Perhaps you could present your warnings in front of the crown. Daenerys' pulse quickened. The notion of returning to the city so soon brought a sharp pang of anxiety. But if she was serious about forging alliances, she would have to speak with the king eventually. I would welcome such an arrangement if the crown is willing. Have you the means to send a raven? I do, he said, rubbing the scar on his cheek. But that's not the same as guaranteeing a warm reception. You might find yourself arrested upon arrival. There are those in King Bran's court who see you as the greatest villain of our time. Daenerys accepted the cup of watered wine, her hand steady. If I must stand before them in chains to deliver my message, I will. Grey Worm shifted behind her, clearly unhappy with that notion, but Daenerys pressed on. I will abide by the king's decision. Let us see if justice has any place alongside wisdom. Ser Kylon studied her intently, then gave a short nod. You are either sincere or you are a brilliant deceiver. Either way, I will do as you ask. I will send a raven to King's Landing, informing the king and his hand that Daenerys Targaryen has come to Duskandale seeking peaceful discourse, warning of a looming threat. I can ask for safe conduct if they wish to hear you out. A flicker of relief coursed through Daenerys. It was more than she had hoped for. Thank you, Ser Kylon. That is all I ask. He looked toward a window slit where daylight poured through. You may remain in Duskandale for a few days while you await a response. But your dragon remains outside the walls and your men remain under watch. If any harm befalls my people, you will answer for it. Understood, Daenerys said softly. That ended their formal talk. Ser Kylon instructed the guards to show Daenerys and Grey Worm to a set of small guest rooms in the fortress keep. It was hardly luxurious, but far better than being turned away. As she settled in, she felt the tension drain from her muscles. She had taken another step forward. It was not a triumph, but it was progress, a raven to King's Landing, a chance to speak before the throne. She wondered if Tyrion Lannister would advise King Bran to reject her outright. She wondered how many men within the city still recalled the ashes and bodies in the streets. It might be a trap. They might decide that capturing or executing her was the safest course. Even so, she would not turn aside. If a dire threat was coming, petty grudges and old wounds had to be set aside. Better that she go in good faith than cower in the shadows. Grey Worm set aside his spear and removed his helm, resting it on a rough wooden table in the cramped chamber that had been given to them. His brow furrowed as he regarded Daenerys. You are placing yourself at their mercy, my queen. Are you certain it's wise? She sank onto a narrow bench, rubbing her temples. I'm not certain, but if we hide or cling to illusions of invincibility, we'll only deepen their fear and hatred. We must meet them openly. Prove with our actions that we are here to protect, not destroy. Grey Worm's eyes flicked to the small window beyond which Drogon's distant roar could be heard. I do not like it. They do not deserve your mercy after what they did. She met his gaze. They do not all deserve to suffer because of a few. That is what I must remember. King's Landing is not simply a den of traitors and liars. It's filled with common folk, families who have barely recovered from war. I will not destroy them again out of bitterness. He hesitated, then nodded with a resigned sigh. As you wish. I will keep you safe as long as I draw breath. She smiled faintly. Thank you, old friend. In truth, she was grateful for his devotion. Even if she sensed the strain between them, he had followed her into the fire of King's Landing once, and it had nearly broken him. Now they walked a different path, one that demanded restraint. She could only hope it would heal the wounds they carried. The next day, she rose early and left the keep to visit Drogon. The guards grumbled but allowed her to pass under heavy watch. Outside the walls, she found her dragon perched on a rocky hill a short distance from the coastal cliffs. He had chased away any travelers with his menacing presence, so the road near him was deserted. As Daenerys approached, she called softly in Valyrian, and Drogon's head snapped up. He huffed a greeting, the morning sun glinting off his ebony scales. She climbed the slope and rested a hand on his flank, taking comfort in his warmth. She wondered if the realm would ever truly accept the presence of a living dragon again. Perhaps acceptance was too much to hope for. Tolerance or even grudging cooperation might be enough. She looked out over the rolling terrain, the walls of Duskandale, the scattered farmsteads. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Life went on, oblivious to the slow approach of whatever doom lurked beyond the horizon. She let her thoughts wander to Jon Snow. He had once stood at her side against the Night King. They had been allies, lovers, each with a claim to the Targaryen bloodline. Then, at the crucial moment, he had betrayed her in the name of saving innocence. She still felt the ache of that betrayal. She wondered if he was still in the north, if he would even believe she was alive if word reached him. She wondered if, despite everything, he might stand with her again should the realm face a new long night. She lowered her head, closing her eyes against a gust of wind. The past was a mire, threatening to drag her down. She had to focus on the future. As she ran her fingers over Drogon's scales, she whispered a quiet vow that she would not let heartbreak or vengeance turn her into that same fiery scourge. If this second life was a gift, she would use it to safeguard rather than destroy. The day passed slowly. Ser Kylon had sent a raven, but no reply would come so swiftly. Daenerys spent her time talking with local townspeople under guarded supervision. She listened to their concerns about bandits, rising taxes, poor harvests. She offered advice where she could, drawing on her experiences in Essos, but she made no grand promises. She simply let them see she was willing to hear their troubles. By evening, word of the Dragon Queen's calm demeanor had spread through Duskandale, softening the hostility somewhat. She heard that some folk even whispered that the stories of her madness might have been exaggerated or that death had purged her of the curse. She did not dwell on rumors, but took heart that at least they were not calling for her head. A week passed in uneasy waiting. Daenerys itched to move on, but Ser Kylon counseled patience. If the king grants you an audience, you should be here to receive the reply. If you leave, they will never find you. So she remained in Duskandale, occupying herself with whatever small duties she could find. She helped quell a tavern brawl simply by walking in, flanked by Grey Worm, her presence intimidating enough to stop the fighters. She asked the local scribes about trade routes, trying to see if she could direct any relief supplies to outlying villages. More than once, she soared above the town on Drogon, deliberately holding her fire to let the townsfolk grow used to the sight of the dragon without immediate devastation. Some grew bold enough to stand on the walls and watch in cautious fascination. Others still hid, certain that any moment the creature would turn its flames upon them. But day after day, no flames came. At last, in the early hours of a chilly morning, a raven arrived. Ser Kylon summoned Daenerys to the council chambers with haste. She entered to see him pacing, a parchment clutched in his hand. He wore a grim expression. "I have a reply," he said. Daenerys' chest clenched. "From King Bran?" From his hand, Tyrion Lannister. "It's complicated." He glanced around at the guards who waited at the edges of the hall, then turned back to Daenerys. "He says the crown acknowledges the possibility of your return. They do not confirm nor deny that you live, but they will not refute it either. He invites you to travel to King's Landing under safe conduct to present your case. But the letter also says that there are many in the city who may seek to harm you and that your presence alone could cause unrest. He strongly advises caution." Daenerys felt her pulse pound. A mixture of relief and dread churned in her gut. She had not doubted that Tyrion was still hand or that he would respond with careful neutrality. He extends safe conduct, so presumably I will not be arrested on sight? Ser Kylon hesitated, scanning the letter again. "It says you have the crown's word that you may enter the city with a limited retinue and speak before the king's council. But there is no guarantee that various factions or individuals won't take matters into their own hands. The city is restless and your return could spark violence." She breathed out slowly. "I understand. I'm willing to take the risk. Will you permit me to leave then?" "I won't stop you," he said, "though I advise you to go with as few soldiers as possible. The more you bring, the more likely someone will overreact. And you should decide what to do with your dragon. If Drogon lands in the streets, I can scarcely imagine the chaos it would cause." Daenerys knew he was right. She recalled the terror that had seized King's Landing the day she and Drogon broke the Lannister defenses. Yet going without Drogon felt like leaving her heart behind and leaving her single greatest advantage. "I will not take him into the city," she said quietly, "but he will not be far. If I walk into danger, I cannot face it alone." Ser Kylon sighed. "As you wish. Then this is farewell?" She nodded, gratitude stirring in her chest. "Yes, and thank you for the hospitality, strained though it was." He gave a short bow. "I pray you find what you seek, for all our sakes." With that, Daenerys left the council chamber, Grey Worm at her side. They returned to their quarters and prepared. The next morning, at sunrise, they departed Duskandale with a retinue of only 10 unsullied, their horses laden with meager supplies. The townsfolk gathered to watch them go, some with open curiosity, others still shadowed by fear. Daenerys acknowledged them with a nod. She had done what she could hear. Now she would face the heart of the realm. They rode in silence along the road that led south, curving toward the Blackwater Bay. Daenerys' thoughts churned with old memories, unbidden images of that fateful day in King's Landing. She saw again the Red Keep's towers, the bells ringing, the carnage. She had wanted to burn away the old cruelty of the world, but she had only sown new horrors. She had died for that choice. Now she would walk those same streets as one seeking to save rather than destroy. She did not know if her nerve would hold. Yet with each step her horse took, she firmed her resolve. She was not that queen anymore. She would not yield to rage. The days passed in a blur of dusty roads and wary travelers. A few recognized her. Some bowed, others spat. But no one dared accost her, with Drogon sometimes appearing in the skies above. The closer they got to King's Landing, the more the signs of rebuilding became evident. Burned farmhouses had been torn down, replaced with fresh timber. Scorched fields were partially cleared for new planting. Here and there, Daenerys spotted small wooden memorials or grave markers, a sobering reminder of the dead. As they crested a final ridge, the sprawling vista of King's Landing opened up before them. The city perched on the Blackwater's edge, enclosed by tall walls. Daenerys saw evidence of reconstruction. New towers rising in place of collapsed ones, scaffolds along portions of the walls. The Red Keep loomed atop Aegon's high hill, looking oddly diminished in the absence of the Iron Throne that had once drawn so much blood. Smoke curled from countless chimneys, and ships dotted the bay. The moment jolted her heart. She recalled the ashes drifting through the streets, the taste of soot on her tongue, the screams. She forced herself to blink away the vision of ruin and focus on the present. They descended toward the city gates, which stood repaired but still scarred by scorch marks in some places. A heavy presence of guards manned the walls. When Daenerys and her retinue drew near, crossbowmen bristled, and the guards called out for them to halt. Daenerys rode forward, lifting her voice. "I come under safe conduct from the hand of the king. I am Daenerys Targaryen." The guard captain shouted an order. Men scrambled. Daenerys waited, listening to her pulse thrum in her ears. At length, a figure emerged atop the gatehouse, clad in a quilted tunic bearing the crown's sigil. "Is your dragon here?" he called, voice echoing against the walls. "He is not within the city," Daenerys answered. "He will remain outside the gates unless I require him. We come unarmed under the hand's invitation." The figure conferred with others, then issued commands. The gates began to creak open, a slow, ponderous motion. Daenerys guided her horse through, Grey Worm beside her. The Unsullied followed, their faces set in grim determination. Inside, the city spread out in a maze of narrow streets. Rebuilt houses stood shoulder to shoulder, some old structures blackened by fire. People scattered at the sight of the small band with the Targaryen banner, uncertain and afraid. A hush fell like a ripple through the crowd, broken only by murmurs of disbelief. Daenerys forced herself to keep her chin high, her posture regal yet subdued. She was no conqueror. She was a visitor stepping into a city she had once destroyed. The guard escort led them along a main avenue, passing under the shadow of older walls. Daenerys saw children peering out from doorways, saw beggars in the alleys. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming. It took all her resolve not to be swallowed by guilt. Finally, they approached the Red Keep, or what remained of it. The once majestic stronghold looked patched in places, as if entire sections had been rebuilt from rubble. The main gates bore new iron reinforcements. A line of soldiers waited, among them a familiar small figure in a neat doublet. Tyrion Lannister stood at the forefront, his mismatched eyes watchful. His face had aged since she last saw him. Deep lines creased his brow, and his hair was more silver than gold, but his gaze was as penetrating as ever. She noticed that he wore the hand's pin on his breast. Daenerys dismounted, her heart thudding. Tyrion took a few steps forward, watching her closely. Neither spoke for a moment, 1,000 unspoken accusations hovering in the air. Then Tyrion inclined his head in a stiff gesture of greeting. "Your Grace," he said softly, "I see that the tales of your resurrection were not lies after all." She searched his face. "Tyrion," she murmured, "it has been a long road." His mouth tightened at the corners as though he wrestled with a torrent of emotions, fear, guilt, anger. But he held himself steady. "Indeed it has. The city still struggles to rebuild. The scars run deep." Daenerys bowed her head, unable to meet his eyes for a moment. "I know. I am truly sorry for what I did. If you will allow it, I want to help ensure it never happens again." A wry, bitter twist touched Tyrion's lips. "Help rebuild the city you destroyed? Bold. Still, the king has agreed to hear you. I will take you to the throne room, what passes for a throne room these days." Daenerys nodded, feeling Grey Worm's tension at her back. She glanced at him, and he gave her a firm look, silently reminding her that he would protect her if anything went awry. She turned to Tyrion. "Lead on, then." Tyrion barked an order to the soldiers, who fell in around Daenerys's group. forming a cautious procession. They climbed the steps into the Red Keep's courtyard, which was still marred by scorched stone. Half-collapsed arches were under reconstruction. Workers paused to gawk. Daenerys forced herself not to flinch as they passed the remnants of halls she once strode through triumphantly. Memories flooded her. Standing victorious over Cersei Lannister, gazing upon the city from the ramparts, then hearing the toll of bells that she had ignored in her fury. She banished the recollections. She had to face the present moment. The throne room loomed ahead. The massive doors were repaired but not fully polished, showing the blackened timbers where Drogon's fire had licked them. Tyrion walked with a slight limp, an injury from the war, perhaps. He glanced back at Daenerys once, his expression unreadable, then pushed open the doors. Inside, the hall was different from what Daenerys remembered. The Iron Throne was gone, melted into a twisted ruin. In its place stood a simpler seat of carved weirwood, draped with banners of the Seven Kingdoms. The floor still bore scorch marks, though some effort had been made to scrub them away or cover them with new tiling. Light streamed through stained glass windows, many of them still under repair. At the far end of the hall sat a figure with dark hair threaded with silver, pale eyes distant as if contemplating realms unseen. Bran the Broken, King of Westeros, though to Daenerys' eyes he looked neither triumphant nor comfortable in his seat. He rested in a sturdy chair with carved arms, his posture stiff, hands folded in his lap. A small council of lords and knights stood on either side, including a gaunt-faced woman Daenerys did not recognize, and a handful of others who regarded her with open suspicion. Tyrion stepped aside and gestured for Daenerys to approach. Grey Worm and her retinue hung back, uncertain whether they were permitted to enter. Tyrion motioned that they could come, but the guards in the hall raised a murmur of protest. Ultimately, Daenerys gave a slight nod, indicating that most of her men should wait at the threshold. Only Grey Worm followed her closely as she walked forward. Her footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. The last time she was here, the walls had practically burned. She felt a chill run through her. Bran regarded her impassively, his gaze impossible to read. At length, he spoke in a voice softer than she remembered. "Daenerys Targaryen." She inclined her head, though she sensed every eye in the hall fixed upon her. "Your Grace." He did not shift from his seat, nor did he command her to kneel. Instead, he let silence stretch. Then he breathed out, as though in resignation. "I have seen many things, Daenerys. I saw you in the moment of your greatest triumph and in the moment of your greatest fall. I saw the city burn through the eyes of ravens. I have wondered what I would do if you ever returned." Her throat tightened. I cannot imagine what it must be like to see all that you do. I have no words to excuse my actions. I can only say that I have come now to repair what can be repaired and to warn you of a new threat rising beyond our sight. Bran's gaze flickered as if he viewed something far beyond the walls of the throne room. Shadows in the east, born of old magic. A swirl of darkness around the seas. The Red Woman saw it too, didn't she? Daenerys stared, her skin prickling. "She did." Tyrion cleared his throat. "Your Grace, Daenerys claims that she has changed. She says she wishes to unite the realm against this danger. Is there a place for her in your kingdom?" The question hung in the air, and Daenerys waited, heart pounding. At last, Bran spoke, his voice distant. "What is done cannot be undone. Thousands perished in the flames. There is fear, anger, and hatred for you in the city. But there is also the reality that something far worse may be coming. I cannot ignore that." One of the lords to Bran's side, a tall man with stern eyes, snapped, "Your Grace, she is a murderer. You should have her executed and be done with it. This talk of new threats is likely a ruse to sow chaos again." A murmur of agreement rippled among a few courtiers. Daenerys kept her face calm, though inside she recoiled. Grey Worm set his jaw, clearly itching to defend her, but he held himself back. Bran lifted his hand, silencing them. "She has come here willingly under safe conduct to deliver her warning. We are not butchers. We will hear her out." His gaze shifted to Daenerys. "Yet I would hear your plan. You speak of unity. How do you envision achieving it when so many hate and fear you?" Daenerys drew a careful breath, conscious that her next words might seal her fate. "By doing what I failed to do before. By offering mercy and protection instead of fire and blood. I am not here to take your throne, nor any throne. If you wish to keep wearing the crown, I will not challenge you for it. I only ask that you and the lords of Westeros prepare for a threat that cannot be met by scattered fiefdoms. I have one dragon left. His fire can be a shield instead of a sword. I have a small number of loyal followers, but we need the realm's armies if this darkness comes. I offer you my service if you will accept it." An audible stir passed through the hall. One courtier whispered, "The Dragon Queen, offering fealty?" Another hissed, "She's lying. She wants to worm her way back in." Daenerys ignored the whispers, eyes on Bran. She was prepared to kneel if that was required, though her pride clenched at the thought. But pride was what had led to her downfall. Bran studied her with that distant, haunted gaze. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You have seen the cost of unbridled power, Daenerys Targaryen. Perhaps you have indeed learned. For now, I will not condemn you to death. Neither will I grant you unconditional freedom of the realm. You will remain under watch and advisor in matters of the threat you speak of. Should it come, we will see if your warnings hold true. If they do, I will call the banners to join forces with you. But know this, if you seek to harm these people again, no shadow of prophecy will save you from justice." Daenerys exhaled, relief and sorrow mingling in her chest. She dipped her head. "I accept your terms." The tall lord with stern eyes opened his mouth to protest, but Bran silenced him with a look. Tyrion stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I will handle the arrangements for her lodging and oversight. Your Grace, if that is your wish." Bran nodded wearily. "Do it, Lord Hand, and keep me informed. Daenerys, do not squander this chance." She bowed her head again, unsure how else to respond. A host of emotions churned within her. Gratitude for her life, sorrow for what she had wrought, trepidation for the future. But she had done it. She had stood in the throne room without demanding the throne, and she had survived. Now a long path stretched before her. She would have to earn the trust of a city she had once destroyed, to gather allies in the face of a threat few believed in. She steeled herself. If Melisandre's visions were true, time might be short. She followed Tyrion out of the hall, Grey Worm at her side, while courtiers muttered and guards eyed her with suspicion. Outside, the sun shone on the battered courtyard, illuminating scaffolds and piles of rubble. It struck her how emblematic that sight was. King's Landing, still in ruins, trying to rebuild. So too must she rebuild herself, piece by piece. A queen once broken by vengeance, now seeking a path to redemption. Tyrion guided her down a corridor toward a smaller wing of the Red Keep that had been partially restored. Soldiers followed at a polite distance, making it clear she was under constant watch. She glanced at Tyrion. "You stood beside Bran. You helped bring me down." He flinched slightly, but did not deny it. "I advised Jon. I tried to save the city from the worst outcome. I told you that day in the throne room I would not serve a tyrant." She swallowed, forcing herself not to grow defensive. "I know, and I am sorry I did not listen sooner." His eyes flicked to her, a mixture of sadness and relief. "If you truly mean to set things right, then perhaps we can find a way forward. But it will not be easy. Many here have lost family, friends, everything, and they blame you. You will have to be patient." She nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. "I will do whatever it takes." With that, they stepped into a modest chamber, sparsely furnished but serviceable. Soldiers stood outside. Tyrion gestured to the room. "Consider this your quarters. Grey Worm can stay with you or adjacent, but the city guard insists on a perimeter. You're not exactly free to roam." Daenerys released a breath. "I understand. Thank you, Tyrion." He gave a curt nod, then softened. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're alive. The world is a strange place, and perhaps you still have a role to play in saving it." She managed a faint smile. "So do I." Tyrion left, the guards closing in behind him. Daenerys entered the room, Grey Worm lingering in the doorway. The walls were freshly plastered, the bed a simple frame with coarse linens. She stood there, absorbing the silence. She was no prisoner in chains, but neither was she truly free. Yet she had done the seemingly impossible, stood before the king of Westeros and survived. Now came the harder part, proving that she deserved the second chance, that her warnings of darkness were not just a desperate ploy. She moved to the small window, gazing out at the city. Though partially rebuilt, it still bore the wounds of her wrath. She let the guilt wash over her, reminding herself that regret was not enough. She had to act. She had to protect these people from the evil lurking beyond the horizon, just as she had once sought to protect the slaves of Essos. This time, she would not allow rage to guide her. She closed her eyes and exhaled, remembering the swirl of warmth she felt when Melisandre brought her back from death. The Lord of Light had spared her for reasons she still did not fully understand. But she had a chance to be a fire that guarded rather than devoured. She opened her eyes. In the distance, she saw Drogon perched on a crag above the city, a dark shape against the sky. She would not abandon him, nor the vow she had made to use his power only for a just cause. A faint hint of determination flickered within her chest. She was Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, reborn from the ashes of her own failings. She had come to King's Landing once more, not as a tyrant or a conqueror, but as a woman seeking to save the realm from shadows that drew closer by the day. Let them watch her. Let them doubt. She would show them what she had become, and in time, perhaps they would see that fire could light a path through the darkness, not simply burn all it touched. Locked in that silent chamber, Daenerys drew a slow breath, preparing for the trials yet to come. She would not falter. She had walked through death and returned with the knowledge that her greatest enemy had once been herself. Now she would stand firm against any evil, within or without, determined to forge a future free of the horrors she had once unleashed. If the realm needed a champion of fire against the coming night, then Daenerys Stormborn would be that champion, and in doing so, perhaps earn the redemption that once seemed forever out of reach.